Welcome back to the channel. My name's Kevin, and today we are dry aging 35-day New York strip. I'm going to show you the process from start to finish. So let's hop right into this. I'm going to show you a quick montage of fresh beef going in there and then what it looks like coming out. And then I'll walk you through just trimming it up and getting it to the steaks I want and the roast I want. So let's get right to it. All right, so all the dramatic shots are over. What we're gonna do now is break this down into steaks. Maybe I'll leave a section here for a New York strip roast and just do something different. But as you can see, this nice piece here is just beautiful. I'm not picking up a lot of smells. We have some nice pellicle formation here. So I have two knives. I have the knife to make the hard cuts, and I'm gonna show you which lines I'm gonna follow here in just a second. And then once I have my steaks, I'm not using this just as an illustration, but this will be going in to ground with some fresh chuck, and I'll make burgers out of this whole thing. But you have two knives. This second knife is for once the steaks are off, and you'll see this in just a minute, just to trim around the edges, all right? Just to get some of that hard pellicle released back so you're getting into that soft, delicious beef inside. So that's why I have two knives going on. Discard pile over here. See, it's a weird shape. I won't really be able to get a lot of this meat out, so this is perfect for burgers for later. All right, now the smart thing Steakager did was to create this racking system. This is also 1.5 inches apart. So as you can see, we have some lines here, and these lines are meant for knowing how to perfectly cut your steaks, right? So 1.5 inch steak, 1.5 inch steak. You don't really have to remember any rules of thumb, which the rule of thumb is, that's about 1.5 inch steak from there to there, depending on how big your finger is. But Steakager did it this way. I have a little extra here, so I have a choice to make a very thin steak or to create a 2-inch steak. And I am going to have one 2-inch steak. So what I'm gonna do is go to this next line over, cut right down that line. I'm trying to cut straight through as well as possible because I don't want a saw motion. Like, you don't want your meat to look like a chainsaw went down it. So I'm trying to make very precise cuts and really put some force into it so I'm not going back and forth. I'm trying to make as little back and forth as possible. And we had a lot of bark I call it bark because I use the smoker so much. We had a lot of pellicle build up at the bottom. So you can see it's hard. You really got to use some force to get through there. That's completely fine. But look at this thing. This thing is gorgeous. You can see I did a better job on this second cut here, where the first cut, when I was cutting the end piece off, you can see some sawing motions in there. That's what I'm trying to avoid, but hey, it happens. So if it happens, it happens. Don't lose too much sleep over it. So I made a 2-inch steak there. I'm gonna move to the 1.5-inch steaks. You just try to follow the lines as best as you can. I might have to sharpen this knife up because this spot right here is really tough, and that can happen. There we go. That can happen with dry aging. Anything worth doing is normally hard. So this is okay. Oh, look at that. Now there's a perfect cut, or perfect steak, I should say. It's got just the right lines in it where you can see over here the pattern. You know, there's a line going through there. Here, this is what you'd get and pay lots of money for at a restaurant. So this is just marvelous. I love it. I'm hungry. This might be lunch. All right, so hopefully I even that out. And now we can get into regular 1-inch steaks. Ooh, this spot right here, you know, it's like boot leather, so you got to be careful. Just take your time, no rush. You know, we're not a 5-star restaurant here. We're just trying to make great steaks at home. You know, and this is my first time doing it with these, using the Steakager. And as you can see, these are just perfect steaks that are coming out now. And it looks like we're getting through that tough spot there. Just try to follow the line down. All right, so we have one good chunk here. It looks like when they butchered it, they left the little bones here. So that's what that is, which is completely fine. One thing that happens when you're working with dry age, the fat starts to turn to like a butter consistency. It starts to melt at the touch. So that's very common. What I'm gonna try to do here, as you can see, we got another funky indentation from the cut of beef from the butcher. So I'm gonna try to cut it down and keep it like this as much as possible. And I'm gonna vacuum seal it and freeze it for a roast. And that's something, my guess, when I finally cook it up, I can tell you right now, they've never had a roast cooked like a prime rib, but New York strips. So it's gonna blow their minds. It's gonna be delicious, and hopefully we can start partying pretty soon. As you can see, this is just a spectacular future roast. See, I was sawing too much there, so that's user error on my part, but guess what? I'm gonna be fine. I can live with that. But you can just see this thing. It's getting glistening because to the touch, it melts to the touch. Still not picking up any like nut flavors. It was supposed to go for 30 days. It ended up going for 35 days because I went on a little trip, and is what it is. You can have these things go longer. Just put a little water in the basin to keep the humidity up for longer dry ages. So we've got two nice pieces. I'll vacuum seal together. I have a lot of brisket trimmings in my freezer. Fresh brisket, dry aged New York strip. you put that all in a food processor, it's gonna be amazing. All right, let's start trimming this up. Now, since I don't trim these up, you know, this is my first experiment with dry ager. I've done the dry age bags, but since I don't trim this up a lot and it's not muscle memory, it's not something I do a lot, I'm gonna go through and I'm gonna find the piece I want to be my beginner piece. And this is one of the smaller steaks I cut versus going right for the roast. I wanna get some trimming practice in before I trim up my masterpiece here. That's right, it's a masterpiece. Or before I start trimming up this beautiful, thick 2-inch steak. So that's my reasoning there. I wanna get some practice in on a steak I could eat for lunch, you know, no frills to it or anything like that. Boom. All right, so what I wanna do here is just trim back as little as possible. Sometimes, you know, you're new to this, you're gonna be doing much more. All this stuff can be kept for ground beef later on. So don't beat yourself up if you feel like you trimmed up a little too much or not enough. You'll get there. This is a new process for a lot of people. See, this is, you know, boot leather. It's hard as anything, but we want to get past it to where it gets soft. You can still have some brown in there, but you don't want any hard. You can't chew that. You can't eat that. So just take your time. I like to make little cuts when possible, because little cuts mean little mistakes versus you try to do all one big cut all at once, you mess up, then you got a big mistake on your hand. You know. I'm gonna leave a good bit of fat. This is all experimenting for myself. So some of these I wanna keep on and cook with extra fat, because a lot of these I'm gonna vacuum seal. But if I keep the fat and then I find out, you know what, I wanna trim this down even more, I'll be able to do that before I cook my next ones. So I'm not taking off too much fat here. You know, I probably could have gotten away with keeping some of that, but this is what you want to do, so have fun with it. But you see, just keep with the small cuts. That would be my recommendation as a beginner before you get really good. And I don't know, I don't follow a lot of dry age people. I try to stay off the forums because, you know, a lot of those people are ride or die. If you do one thing wrong, they're gonna scream at you, and that's not fun. So I just ignore it altogether. So maybe they always do it this way and take small cuts, or maybe they have gotten to the skill level where they're making big cuts. Touching around, most of this seems soft enough. You know, I'm gonna cook it like this and see if that's an issue. And then before I cook my next ones, do I need to take that off? Is this a little too tough and I should cut it back? It's food, it's cooking, it's your cooking. Have fun with it, experiment. All right, I think I'm gonna leave it like that for right now and eat pretty well tonight. As you can see, there's a lot of discard, right? This is why it's important to put this in vacuum freeze bags, save it for later to make amazing burgers. But the real takeaway is that primal, you wanna get big primal cuts. You saw how big it was. You know, 4 of these, well, not 4, 3 of these. That's how big it was, because when you cut it down, you're gonna get a lot of loss. So make sure you go full primals when you're dry aging. You start off with, you know, a steak this big, you dry age it for 30 days, guess what? Your steak isn't even gonna be this big. It's gonna be super tiny after you cut back everything. So that's why it's important to get big primal cuts. Okay, so this is the roast. As you can see, a lot of big pieces came off. This is just beautiful, nice mahogany work. You know, if you're a woodworker, love this stuff. Smelling this is where you're getting a lot of that nutty smell. You're picking up a little bit of funk, which is great. Some people don't like that. I personally love it. So this is the roast that I'm gonna do. So I will do a reverse sear, bring the temperature up internal. But for right now, you can still see we got silver skin on here, little patches of pellicle. That's not a big deal. I want to get this packaged up, so what I'm going to do is freeze this, and before I cook it, I'm going to trim up some more of the silver skin, get a feel for how the others are cooking with leaving more fat on. I love a lot of fat on my cooks, but I'll have a few experiments where I might end up taking off some of that fat. So I want to know, I want to experiment with this. I want to get a good feeling for this before I completely take all this off. I mean, there's definitely spots in here. Too much silver skin. I can't serve that to guests. You don't want them chewing on too much. But what about back here? You know, the silver skin's probably going underneath there, but it's something you don't have to do all at once. I don't want to do this right now, so I'm going to vacuum seal it, put it away, experiment with some other steaks, and then come back to this. So that is totally acceptable if that's what you want to do. It's your beef, you're at home, you do you. All right, very simple. 30 days turned into 35 days, and the Steakager did everything for me. It was extremely set it and forget it, which I really, really love. I've done the dry age bags, and like I've said before, my wife's always asking, when is this stuff coming out of the refrigerator, giving me back my refrigerator space. So I love the fact that I have a dedicated fridge to doing dry age, because it is a very unique process, very rewarding process, and I don't have to go to the store. You saw that one steak that I'm cooking up later today. That would run me about $45 to $65, depending on what city you're in and how much they're charging for that steak. And that's today. Think about it in 5 years' time, you know, where those steaks will be $70, $75. So it really worked out. I covered a lot in this video, so I'm gonna leave it right there and not go over any more. If you have further questions about dry aging or want me to try a different experiment, leave those comments down below. Make sure to hit that thumbs up button. And I've already started to accumulate a playlist that I'll leave at the end of the video, so you can get all the questions you have answered about what is dry age, what is a Steakager, does that fit in my life? Getting those answers so you can make a better decision. I hope you guys are having a great day, and I will see you all very soon.